Hello everyone, this is Iran Talk, and in this video I'd like to discuss something very important and urgent, and that is the location of the samples from ancient Iran. And this will just discuss about the various sites from which these samples were taken. Now all of these samples are mostly from contemporary Iran, but many of them were also from Central Asia, the homeland of the Iranics or the Iranian peoples. And another interesting thing to point out here is that currently we have samples from many sites in Iran. We have Abdul Hussein Neolithic as well as Ganjdare Neolithic. So these are Neolithic sites, and we have samples from these sites. We also have Chalcolithic era samples from the Haji Firuz site, from Saga B, and from Tepe Hisar. And finally, we have another site from Iran, which is Shahr-e-Sokhta. And aside from this, we also have samples from from Central Asia, from the Ghana site. But also, not only that, we also have an early Iranian sample from what is today Turkmenistan, from the Iron Age. And this early Iranian sample is around 50% BMAC derived and 50% derived from Indo-European steppe peoples, proving that there was indeed a process of hybridization between Indo-European steppe peoples and the native farmers of the BMAC culture in Central Asia. And then it was these BMACized Iranics which migrated into Iran and spread the Iranian languages. But before I begin, I just want to make one thing clear. So these ancient sites are just referred to as Iran Neolithic or Iran Chalcolithic, but it should be noted that these populations were not speakers of Indo-European languages, and they likely spoke native languages closely related to Elamite and Dravidian languages. Now, it is debatable, but I think Dravidian languages have their origins in Iran, in northwestern Iran, as there was a migration of Neolithic Iranian farmers to South Asia, which established the Indus Valley civilization. And when this happened, most of Iran became depopulated, and these Neolithic Iranians were mostly replaced by Chalcolithic Iranians who migrated from Anatolia. And these Chalcolithic farmers were the result of a mixture between Neolithic Iranian farmers and Neolithic Anatolians, or which later migrated to Europe and became the early European farmers. So there is some Neolithic Anatolian admixture in Iran as well, and these Chalcolithic Iranians were around 70% 70% Neolithic Iranian and 30% Anatolian farmer derived. But anyways, without further ado, I will begin with the video now. So here is a map from Narasimhan's study from 2018, and this is a map of the sites of these sites in Iran from which these samples were taken from. And this is very interesting. The three major sites from Iran from this study, well, there are four actually, possibly five, but the three major ones are the two Chalcolithic Iranian sites and the one site from Neolithic Iran, Ganjdare. So as you can see, the two of them are located in western and northwestern Iran. One of them is located in northern Iran, bordering the Caspian region, and another one is located on the Iranian-Afghan border, which is the Shahr-e-Sokhta site. But anyways, here we have in the northwest, we have there in the purple circle, that's the site for Haji Firuz, and these samples form the bulk of the modern Iranian genome. I will provide calculations at the end of this video as well. And this is from which most Iranians derive the majority of their ancestry. The other one is a bit before that, the Ganjdara Neolithic site. So this was prior to the migration of the Chalcolithic Iranians across Iran. This was the Neolithic Iranian site, and populations similar to this, those found at this site, migrated into South Asia and established the Indus Valley civilization. But anyways, that's the Ganjdare site. Then in the northeast, bordering the northeast and the Caspian region, in the square, purple square, you have and there's a legend here as well, so you can pause the video and take a look at the legend. But you have the site which is Tepe Hisar, and this is another Iran Chalcolithic site. And Mazandaranis today derive a significant portion of their ancestry from these farmers. These are all closely related cultures, and there are very minimal differences between them. Then after this you have the Shahr-e-Sokhta sites on the border between Iran and Afghanistan, and these are mostly Iran Neolithic sites with minor native South Asian influence. So the influence of South Asian hunter-gatherers, and this ancestry, the South Asian hunter-gatherer ancestry, is found in Iran only at 1 to 2%, whereas in South Asia it's from 20 to 60%, 20 to 70%, sorry. But yeah, that's the main thing to take away from here. And then you have a couple of sites in Central Asia. You have the Goner sites, and Goner was a major site of the BMAC culture, and this was a major Central Asian culture. These people were mostly Neolithic Iranian farmers with minor steppe admixture. And then you also have Zarkutan, you have Sapali Tepe, and you have other sites as well. You have Parkai, and you also have Tepe-Au now. All of these are in contemporary Turkmenistan, in the southern part of the country bordering Iran, and this is where the BMAC culture was centered. The BMAC culture people were not Turks. They were genetically Neolithic Iranian farmers with minor steppe Indo-European admixture. This was before the arrival of the Andronovo people, who migrated into this culture and mixed with the natives and then spread the Iranian languages across Iran. But this is just the first map I am going to be looking at, and now I will be taking a look at another map. But yeah, if you have any questions about this, please comment in the comment section and I will get back to them. So again, these populations are the ones from which Iranians derive the majority of their ancestry today, not from Arabs or Semites, but from these populations. Now the second map is from Damgard's study from 2018 as well. It's titled "The First Horse Herders and the Impact of Early Bronze Age Steppe Expansions into Asia." And this is an interesting map as it shows populations across Asia from this study. But the main thing to take into account here and to focus on here is the Iron Age Iranian. And this Iron Age Iranian is not the Iron Age Iranian found at a few other sites, which I will discuss later. But oh yeah, before I move on, I just wanted to say that there were two Iron Age Iranian samples found in Iran, one from the Haji Firuz site and another from the Tepe Hasanlu site, which I will get into soon. But this is just in northern Turkmenistan. This is a site where they found an interesting sample, and this was the early Iranian. This sample was the early Iranian, and this early Iranian sample got here likely through the admixture of the BMAC people as well as the Indo-European steppe people, and this sample is around 50% BMAC derived. Obviously this is after the early Srubnaya-like migration into BMAC, so it does contain more steppe than the earlier BMAC populations, but nonetheless it can be modeled as approximately 50% BMAC derived and 50% derived from the Indo-European steppe populations, proving that there was certainly a mixture between the Indo-Europeans and the peoples of the BMAC culture prior to their migration to Iran. And this sample is actually R1A, belongs to the Y haplogroup R1A. Sorry again, I'm not using a script, but let me just get back to this. This sample belongs to the Y haplogroup R1A Z93, and this is the early Iranian and the Iranic haplogroup. And this sample likely reflects the population which migrated into Iran and spread the Indo-European language. So these early Iranians were not Nordic, rather they were a hybrid population of Neolithic Iranian farmers and Indo-European steppe people, and they had no East Asian influence. They were only derived from these two populations, and they had no Semitic related admixture either, as they were centered in Central Asia. Now I will move on. Now moving on, now I will move on and I will discuss the other site from which samples were discovered. So there was an Iron Age Iranian found, and this Iron Age Iranian does not cluster with Nordics, but rather clusters with contemporary Iranians, which is quite remarkable. This Iron Age Iranian was actually from a recent study, and it's pretty interesting. So this was from, I believe the study in question was Brushaski et al. In 2016, and this was from, this study had samples from not only from the Neolithic Iranians but also from the Neolithic Europeans and the Neolithic Anatolians. And this study specifically focused on Neolithic populations, but nonetheless they had one Iron Age Iranian belonging to haplogroup R1b1A2A2, and this was from Tepe Hasanlu, which is a Hurrian site in northwestern Iran. And today 90% of modern Iranians, around 90 to 95% of the ancestry similarity can be modeled to this Iron Age Iranians, except modern Iranians have more steppe admixture than this Iron Age Iranians, and they have more recent admixture as well from South Asia at around 0 to 2%, and from East Asia at around 0 to 3%. But basically my point here is that this was an Iron Age Iranian, and this Iron Age Iranian clustered with contemporary Iranians, proving that there is a great deal of continuity within Iran across almost all populations, with the exception of the populations of the southern coast, which are partially mixed with the South Asians, as well as minor African admixture there as well, and Semitic admixture. But again, this was one of the major sites. Now another Chalcolithic Iranian site which I did not show beforehand, but which the earliest samples came from, is Saga B. And now I will discuss. So here is a map, and on this map you have the site, Saga B site, and it's labeled here. So it's labeled here, and it's in the northwest of Iran, and I will highlight it here. But yeah, it's in the northwestern of Iran, western, north, not really northwest, but western Iran. And this is from where there were 5 samples were found in this site, and they were sequenced, and they were very similar to the Haji Firuz samples. So again, a mixture of Neolithic Iranian farmers and Neolithic Anatolian farmers, and this is important, and this is what you should take out of this map and out of this site. But yeah, this was essentially a major discovery, and it proved it was the first of its kind, proving that in fact Iranians did not derive the majority of their ancestry from Semitic populations as was often believed, but rather Iranians derived the majority of their ancestry from the populations which existed in Iran prior to either the Indo-European migrations or the Arab invasions. And this is quite remarkable as well. And this Saga B site are examples of the earliest earliest Iranian samples from the Chalcolithic era. And now I will just share a PCA, and this PCA has both the Haji Firuz samples as well as the Saga B samples highlighted. And you can see there is some overlap, but the Haji Firuz samples are a bit more Neolithic Anatolian, whereas the Saga B samples are a bit more Neolithic Iranian. But overall, they're mostly of Neolithic Iran descent, and the ratios range between 60 and 40 and 70 and 30 in favor of Neolithic Iranian ancestry in these populations. But Iranians mostly derive their ancestry from these populations, not from Semitic Arabs or either South Asians or even Turks or Mongols, but these are the populations from which Iranians derive the majority of their ancestry. And yeah, that's essentially it for the sites. There are still many sites in Iran, and samples are coming, more samples are coming, so please be on the lookout for that. But these are the main sites, and this is what we have so far from Iran in regards to sampling. And there are many more, in the future there may even be Sasanian or even Achaemenid era samples coming in studies, and those in my opinion will be around 90 to 95% similar to the majority of modern Iranians today. And now I will just present some calculations here to show how much of the ancestry of modern Iranians is derived from the Chalcolithic Iranian populations, as well as from the Indo-European steppe populations. These are a bit different from my previous calculations because I have not included the Levant Bronze Age samples in this. This is just to show the ratio of pure ancestry in regards to pure Neolithic, Chalcolithic Iranian ancestry in Iranian, pure steppe ancestry or Indo-European ancestry, and also the pure South Asian ancestry, as well as East Asian ancestry. So I will begin with those calculations right now. So here are the calculations for the Iranian from Fars. Now, Again, I will explain this right now. Haji Firuz Chalcolithic and Saga B Chalcolithic are obviously the Chalcolithic Iranian sites. Turkmenistan Iron Age is the early Iranian. So the Iranians who were most similar to the ones who spread the Indo-European languages, and then you have the Bedouins. So this is Semitic related admixture. And then you have Bhumij, which is South Asian, ancient South Asian admixture, not the South Asians who were admixed with Neolithic Iranian farmers as was found in Shahri Sokhta, but this is the pure ancient South Asian admixture. And then you have 2% Mongolian. So according to this, the Iranians from Fars are around 95% Caucasoid, and they are primarily derived from native populations from Haji Firuz and Sagabi, but they also have around 33% early Iranian admixture and only 6% Semitic admixture. And I will prove in this analysis that this Semitic admixture is actually ancient, as I will later on show the breakdowns for the samples from the Tepe Hasanlu site, the Iron Age Iranian, and that Iron Age Iranian has around 7.5% of this admixture. But even Zoroastrians have this at the same rate. So this Bedouin B is actually ancient Semitic admixture, not recent admixture from Arabs, but ancient admixture which likely got there from ancient Mesopotamia by way of southern ancient Mesopotamians. But the main thing to take into account from this information is that Iranians are, as a population, are primarily derived from native populations. They have no African influence. They are mainly of native descent with major significant Indo-European influence, but the majority of their ancestry is native, and they have almost no recent Semitic admixture and only 6% ancient Semitic admixture. But anyways, now I will take a look at the Iranian Zoroastrians, and the Zoroastrians are a population which have the most Indo-European influence, and this is quite remarkable as well, and this is very interesting. So here are the Zoroastrians, and as you can see, they have around 38% of their ancestry is derived from the early Iranian. They are very high in steppe admixture at around 25% on average, which is quite remarkable. But you can clearly see that they have no Mongolian influence, which means the invasion of the Mongols and the Turks had no genetic impact on Iran, on the Zoroastrian population in Iran. They also have around 6% Semitic admixture, and because this admixture is present in the Zoroastrian population, then it must follow that this admixture is actually ancient and not recent, as even Zoroastrians have it. The majority of their ancestry, much like the Iranians from Fars, is derived from sources which are native to Iran, and they are primarily Caucasoid. They have no Mongoloid ancestry, and they have very little ancient South Asian ancestry, which numbers at around 2%. So they are around 98% Caucasoid, and the majority of their ancestry is derived from ancient sites from Iran, from ancient populations of Iran, but they have around 38% Indo-European or early Iranian admixture on average, and these sample sets were around 17 to 18 per people, but per population. But now I will take a look at the Iranian lores, and the lores have a very interesting breakdown as well. So this is quite interesting as well. But the lores are again very similar to these two populations, and most of their ancestry is also native and not derived from Arabs or Turks. So these are the breakdowns of the lores, but before I get into them, individuals in the past have considered the lores to be of pure Aryan stock, and they believe that these are largely Nordic derived populations, because a lot of lores have blonde hair and blue eyes. But this is not the case, as the majority of the ancestry of the modern day lure is of native stock, is a native. And again, there is some Indo-European steppe influence, but it is less than that found in the Iranians from Fars, or those Iranians from the Zoroastrians. But again, the lores have very little foreign influences, and again, they have very tiny amount of Mongolian and South Asian influence, and are around around 96% Caucasoid, and are primarily a Caucasoid population. And again, this is just a breakdown for the lore. So again, they are primarily of native descent, but they also have early Iranian ancestry, which is found in the majority of Iran's population. All Iranian populations have this Indo-European ancestry. It is higher than believed, as the steppe in Iran ranges from 15 to 25%, and the early Iranian admixture ranges from around 23 to 38% based on my most recent calculations. But again, the Semite is around 6%, so this is again ancient. It's not recent from Arab invaders. There were very little Arab settlers in Iran, but you can clearly see that the Lor are again a native Iranian population and not a population derived from foreign ancestries. Now the results of the next population won't really surprise you, but what will surprise you is their low steppe admixture. And Mazandaranis actually have the lowest steppe admixture in Iran from the major populations, and the reason for this is the fact that Mazandaran and the Caspian region has been bordered by heavy mountains, and these mountains have prevented any major influence or genetic intrusions into this region. But again, these are mostly native derived population. They are also the only population which lack any ancient Semitic admixture, proving that the mountainous geography of Mazandaran even kept out genetic influences from the ancient Semitic movements into Iran. Now again, these ancient Semites were Caucasoid. They were not heavily admixed with Africans as are today's Semitic populations from North Africa or from Arabia or anywhere. You know, those populations are heavily admixed with sub-Saharan African sources, and you know, this is quite interesting. But Iranians lack this admixture. But what you see here again is that the pattern is clear. The Mazandaranis have a very have a genetic profile which is very native, and then they have around 23% early Iranian influence, and their steppe is around just 13%, but yet they are the fairest population in all of Iran. And this is quite interesting as well and quite remarkable, and this proves that the Mazandaranis are also a population which have had very little foreign influence. They have no Mongolian influence, almost no Mongolian influence, and the majority of their ancestry again is derived from native Iranian populations, and they are around 98% Caucasoid, and their only foreign admixture here, non-Caucasoid, comes from Bumij. So again, the ancient South Asian hunter-gatherers. Now it is quite interesting how this admixture got in Iran, but the answers of this are pretty much unclear. But it seems to me that this ancestry made its way to Iran with the migration of the gypsies, who migrated through Iran and then made their way into Europe. And this really did not impact Iranians largely, but I think the fact that at the time Iran's population was heavily depopulated due to the plague as well as the Mongol invasion, I think this is why that the gypsies may have left a minor imprint on Iran's population. And obviously the Mongolian found in Iran's population is largely derived from the invasion of the Turks as well as the Mongol invasion, but this is again very limited in Iran. Now I will take a look at the Kurdish, and these Kurdish samples are from Iraq, not from Iran, but they have a very similar genetic profile to the Iranian Kurds, and these Kurds have around the genetic profile of the Kurd, as much as the Kurds want to believe that they are separate from Iranians and that they are a very distinct population. In fact, the reality is that they are a very Iranian population. They are not a foreign population, and they are neither a foreign nor a special population, and their genetic profile matches Iranians with the exception that they lack any South Asian influence. They have no ancient South Asian influence, and they have steppe admixture, and they are derived from the native populations of the Iranian farmers, as you can clearly see by these calculations. And they have a decent bit of early Iranian admixture at around 27%, but the majority of their ancestry is native, and they are largely a native Iranian population. Now, the final population I'd like to take a look at are the Azeris, and the genetic profile of the Azeris is very interesting as well. But again, the majority of their population is native. They are mostly derived from the Haji Firuz cluster at 62.1%. Then they have early Iranian ancestry at 26.4%, but their East Asian influence is limited to 7.2%. And then you have around 4% Semitic influence, which again is likely ancient, as it's found in the Kurds as well, which are a similar regional population. Sorry about that. But anyways, you can see that the Azeris are also mostly a native Iranian population, and their East Asian influence in the majority of the Azeri population is very limited. These are Azeris from Iran, and their ancestry shows that they are an Iranic population and not a Turkic population, despite speaking a Turkic language. But nonetheless, that's essentially it for these calculations. I have not looked at Iran's minorities because I feel that they have a different genetic makeup, and this video is mainly focusing on the main Iranian population. But if you want me to do a minority Iranian population, just let me know and I will do those calculations as well. But yeah, this is the calculations for the Azeri. Now here is the calculation for the Iron Age Iranian from Tepe Hassanlu, and what's interesting about this sample is that unlike most modern Iranian populations today, he lacks any East Asian influence, and he also lacks any native ancient South Asian influence. So again, these ancient South Asians are distinct from those Indus Valley migrants to Shakre Sokhta, which had Neolithic Iranian admixture, but the Bhumij do not seem to have any Neolithic Iranian admixture. And this means that the ancient South Asian admixture and influence in Iran is very limited. Now, one point that I will bring up here is that this influence is actually there now. It was not there in the ancient Iranians. It may be present in the Sasanian or Achaemenid Iranians, though this is highly unlikely. But as you can clearly see from the Tepe Hassanlu Iron Age sample, that he's mostly derived from native Iranian populations. Most of his ancestry is indeed native, and then he has around 26% early Iranian admixture, and I believe that this was actually from the Mitanni who migrated into the site, since Tepe Hassanlu was actually a Mitanni site. So this is dated to around 1000 BCE, and this is one of the earliest samples we have from the Iron Age. We have a few other samples from the Iron Age, but this is the most notable, and you can clearly see that the Bedouin influence was already present in Iran prior to the migration of the Arabs. Now, the degree to which this was present in all the Iranian population is not known yet, but with more ancient samples we will know the degree to which there was Semitic admixture in ancient Iran, but this Semitic admixture is very limited, as Iranians derive the majority of their ancestry from the native populations, which is quite remarkable. But yeah, again, just to recap, this Iron Age Iranian is around 46% derived from Haji Firuz, 26% from the early Iranian, and 20% from Saga B, and then another 8% from the Bedouin source. And that's essentially it for this video. I'll end off there, but thanks for watching, and please, if you stay to the end, please like, share, and subscribe, and I thank you once again.